Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 7 of the Rodeo Joe Show. We're going to cover week 3 in the NFL. A couple things happened yesterday, some injuries and whatnot. Seems like there's some serious ones happening here lately every week, but we'll go over some of those key injuries. Also got some other things to talk about, and at the end of the segment, I will cover the preview for tonight's Monday night game. Starting off, probably one of the biggest things that happened that's, outside of any injuries or actual outcomes of any football games and whatnot yesterday is that Antonio Brown, and yes, Antonio Brown is in the headlines again. I hope this is the last I have to really talk about this knucklehead for the rest of the season, but he tweeted that he is done with the NFL, and he also proceeded to basically throw Robert Kraft under the bus. He threw Roethlisberger under the bus. He feels that he's a victim, and he doesn't want to be a part of it anymore. So much so is that he re-enrolled at Central Michigan, so he's going back to school. He's got 4 classes that he signed up for. He looks pretty serious about being done with the NFL, at least for this year. You never know what's going to happen. But how do I feel about that? Because everybody kind of looks at the situation like, well, Robert Kraft kind of, basically got a slap on the wrist with what happened with him. And obviously we know the stuff with Ben years and years ago. I don't think it's comparable to what, he's talking about here. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the Patriots kind of made it pretty open how they felt about this whole ordeal when they signed him. They, did he do anything during his time with New England to grant them to feel this way? No, he didn't. He didn't do anything for the 7 days that he was there, but he still had these ongoing allegations keep coming up, and new reports came out. And this is stuff that happened to him years ago, but I mean, when one starts, they all just kind of pile on, and I understand that. And it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. I mean, you shouldn't have got yourself in that mess. Whether or not any of it's true or not, I'm kind of 50-50 on it. I think some of it is, some of it isn't. But still, you couldn't possibly think that you catching 4 passes and 1 big touchdown was going to get you a free pass from New England. You already know how they do things out there. They do it, quote unquote, the New England way, and for him to think that he couldn't, they would let that slide. I mean, it's just, it's just kind of, I don't know. I can't even really think of a good word to say. I guess kind of ignorance on his part to think that they would let that slide. I mean, he has to understand why they did what they did. And for him to even, try to compare it to things that happened before, well, with other players and whatnot, and obviously Robert Kraft, it's something that, no, it hasn't been proven. Nothing's been proven. But, there's something new every day. And you have to understand that, they're going to look at it like, well, what else? I mean, it's a big liability to have, and it's a distraction to the team, and they're not going to have it. And, he wants to feel like he's a victim here. No, you're not a victim. The people that you allegedly, did stuff with, assaulted, what have you, they're the real victims here. You made your bed, now you have to lay in it. And like I said, this is all allegations. I know, I understand that, but he's not getting any punishment from the NFL. But every team has their right, whether or not they want to sign you or fire you. And, he technically hasn't gotten any punishment from the NFL. But don't sit here and play this victim card either when you basically wanted your way out of Oakland. And then you get an opportunity to play for New England, and it doesn't work out. And now with all of a sudden, everybody's against you and stuff. It's just bogus. I don't know what's going through his head, but and this goes back. I've mentioned this earlier, and like I said before, I'm really sick and tired of talking about him, to be honest. But he had every chance written right there with what he was able to do from the time he was drafted to this season in his career to be easily a first ballot Hall of Famer if he kept up to what the numbers that he was putting up, even a small drop off, and I think he still would have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. But because of all this off the field stuff, I don't think he's getting in, and he's the only one. He's the one to blame for that. So he's not getting a pity party on my behalf. He's very talented. Can he still play? Absolutely. He could play as one of the best receivers in the league right now, but his head isn't in the game of football, and until he gets it right, until he gets rid of this diva-like attitude that he has, it's just the worst one I've seen in quite some time. He's basically a good combination of some of the worst attitudes that some of these drama-filled receivers have had, but then he's you intensify that, and that's Antonio Brown. He's just a bad concoction of a T.O., Randy Moss, and Chad Johnson as far as their attitudes and whatnot, and mixed it all together, you get an Antonio Brown. And like I said, even if you did that, I still think he's worse with all that bad, all those bad attitudes combined. Like I said, done talking about him. Don't want to wish bad on anybody, but good luck with your venture outside of football, and hopefully we don't have to talk anymore about this guy unless it's something positive. He's a positive contribution that he's making to society or football, but I don't think that's going to happen either. So we're done with that. I also like to say that the NFL has been getting a lot of flack, and I've spoken on this a couple times as well, for their enforcement of holding calls. Sean Hockley's crew on Thursday night alone, I mentioned this, but threw 10 offensive holding calls or penalties, flags in that game. Yeah, I mean, they wanted to emphasize it this season, so it comes to no surprise that they're thrown at a higher frequency this season. However, the holding calls went down. Is that in large part to maybe Tom Brady going off and being all upset and cranky over it? I don't know. Maybe it's just the NFL is taking a look on it and doesn't like it. I don't know, but there was only 14 offensive holding calls called combined on Sunday. And if you look at what it was through weeks 1 and 2, there was 188 offensive holding calls. So, a drastic drop off. And, with a lot of the games I watched yesterday, that's fine if they want to cut it or cut the penalties out, as far as holding calls go. But they're calling at least in some of the games I watched, they're calling stupid ticky-tack ones that don't need to be called, and they're missing obvious, blatant holds. I counted numerous ones, in particular with the Bengals and Bills game that I watched. So, if you're going to call them, you're going to call them at a high rate. At least be consistent about it. There's nothing worse than a game that's dictated by the referees. I get that, but at least you know what you're getting. You know what you're getting yourself into. Say that, I don't know, there's a large number of them called in the first half. At least you can make a second half adjustment. Be like, guys, come on, hold your blocks. When you're losing your man, let go, get off of them, because they're going to call it. They're watching us, today. But, if you have a blatant, almost looks like a freaking rock bottom slam to somebody to the ground, and it's not called, but then somebody gets called for a hold that's, 10 yards away from the ball and away from the play and isn't going to make any, drastic jump to the ball because they're way out of position. But you want to call that. Don't do it. Call it the way it should be, Call it right down the line. I know we're never going to get that, but we could hope. But that's all I ask for is just some consistency as far as these calls go. But, that's just the way the game is. But not to beat a dead horse with that, but I'd also, lastly, I want to cover some of the bigger injuries that happened. Most notably, I think everybody, if they don't know it, they will soon. Saquon Barkley went down yesterday in the game against Tampa Bay, and it doesn't look good for Giants fans. Doesn't look good for you fantasy people that drafted him first overall, I'm afraid. But he's looking like he's going to be out 4 to 8 weeks. And that's kind of unfortunate because, with the way Daniel Jones played yesterday and kind of resurged the Giants, that could be a really good pillar to lean on, and as far as the season goes. And I seen where they said he won't even be available for the Week 9 matchup against the Cowboys. So that's kind of unfortunate for them, but part of the game. Cam Newton is rolled out again as well. So look for Kyle Allen to take over and start again. And I'm sure Carolina fans won't be disappointed with that, with the way he performed yesterday. But and a couple on the defensive side of the ball. Keanu Neal, he tore his Achilles yesterday, and he is out for the season for Atlanta. So that's kind of unfortunate. And the Colts' Malik Hooker, he tore his meniscus in his knee, and he's looking to be out 4 to 6 weeks. So that's something to keep an eye on. But overall, yeah, just a pretty interesting weekend. I was really surprised by a lot of the games and how everything turned out, and look forward to covering it. And starting with the Dolphins at the Cowboys. Cowboys came into this game very, very highly favored, but they were kind of sloppy at the beginning of this game. And I want to throw this disclaimer out there. I've said it, and I'll continue to say it, but I'll actually be more profound with this week. But the Cowboys are the best team in the NFC. I mean, hands down, I think they are. I know everybody wants to look at their schedule and the teams that they played, and but you play who you're supposed to play. But I look across that board, how good that defense is, and especially how Dak has looked with now he has some weapons to throw to, and with the way Zeke, he'll always give you a solid game on the ground, more times than not. I mean, he's got to be arguably the best running back in the league anyway. When you have all that, you just expect good things. But however, Miami didn't roll over and die like a lot of people figured they would. Against popular belief of how they've been starting the season and stuff. They actually outgained Dallas 216 to 204 yards and only trailed by 4 at halftime. It was a 10-6 ball game at halftime. And they had 4 trips inside the 30 of Dallas. They only managed to get 2 field goals out of it. I don't know if you put that on the Dolphins just being crappy, or you can just say that Dallas just is stout and had it been but don't break defensive mentality. I think it's a little bit of both myself. But Josh Rosen started in this game, as most of you are aware. He did okay. I mean, he didn't do anything earth-shattering by any means. He went 18 for 39 with 200 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. And Dak just played really well. He ended up going 19 for 32, 246, and a touchdown. He ran one in as well, but and then they also had a balanced ground attack going for him. Zeke ended up with 19 carries for 125 yards, and Tony Pollard, the rookie, had 13 carries for 103. So I mean, if they got Dak playing, somewhat consistent to what he's playing right now. I mean, he doesn't have to, the offense doesn't have to have over 400 yards of total offense every week for them to win. But man, if they can get that on top of their defense and how well it plays, they're a very hard team to beat. And like I said, the best team in the NFC, in my opinion. Moving on, we'll go to the Broncos at the Packers. Broncos just cannot get a break in Lambeau. They just they dropped to 0-3 this week, and their lifetime 0-6-1 at Lambeau. It's unfortunate. And they went another game. Their defense, which was supposed to be what this team was built around, was their defense. Again, no sacks, didn't force a turnover. Third consecutive game in a row. They can't do that and expect to win games. But, I mean, you got to tip your hat off to them, though. Despite all that, they still were able to be, within, they were in this game for a good bit of it. But, I mean, Aaron Rodgers he's just playing very, very well. They... And their defense, like I said, Green Bay's defense is playing really well too. I think they're kind of a sleeper 3-0 team, honestly. I don't really hear a lot of people giving them a whole lot of credit, which they should. As far as defensively on the day, Preston Smith had 3 sacks and six total sacks for the Packers, for that matter, and they got 3 turnovers. Flacco, I don't know. I don't know how long he has left in Denver, especially when you see this growing trend of, Kyler Murray coming in, and, he didn't perform the greatest last week, but, and then you have Daniel Jones doing what he did, and then, Kyle Allen coming in and doing what he did. It might be this kind of league-wide thing where it's like, okay, well, you were supposed to be the veteran that was supposed to win us some games. You really haven't done anything too spectacular, so... We're going to move on. I don't know, it'd just be interesting to see how that goes. Again, with Aaron Jones for Green Bay had 2 touchdowns. It's career high for him. And Philip Lindsay also, he did everything he could to try to rally Denver and make this game interesting. But in the end, it was Green Bay all day, 27-16. But Philip Lindsay had 2 touchdowns. So... yeah, I mean, it's kind of shocking to see how bad the Denver defense is performing, because I kind of thought they were one of the better defenses in the league. And, they still, don't allow a huge chunk of yards, but man, the fact that this team can't create a turnover or get a sack is just beyond me. I don't understand it, but I think Flacco's days are numbered there too as well. Like I said, and look for Drew Lock to come in sometime soon. I really think. I'd be surprised if they go into get a couple more losses, be an 0-5 or maybe an 0-6, and Drew Lock doesn't just take over. But moving on, we got the Falcons at the Colts. This game really shocked me. I am just growing increasingly confident and impressed with what Jacoby Brissett and the Colts are able to do week in and week out. I mean, this is the team that you really thought was going to be bottom feeders of the AFC, and they're not looking like it at all. They actually led this game at 20-3 at halftime. Brissett had 2 touchdown passes. He completed the first 16 of his passes. I mean, they looked really good yesterday, to be honest. Atlanta, they're the opposite. I mean, they made it interesting in the end, but at the end of the day, I mean, the Colts just flat out outplayed them. They scored on 5 of their 7 possessions, 2 of which were of 90 or more yards. I mean, like I said, you can't shake what the Colts have been able to do. I mean, I've been thoroughly impressed with what they've been able to do, because they could have just tanked this year like Miami's doing, and nobody would have even thought twice about it. But they're I would definitely say that they're right now. I mean, they're definitely the team to beat in the AFC South. I mean, they've played the most consistent ball so far of any of the other 3 teams in the division. So tip their hats off to them. A high note for Atlanta, though, we will say this, is that Matt Ryan threw for 304 yards. He also had 29 completions and 3 touchdowns and a pick. However, he passed John Elway for 9th in career completions and 11th in touchdowns. So that's one good thing they can talk about. But they also were only 1 penalty away from having a franchise high in penalties yesterday at 16 penalties. I believe it was for 128 yards. It's nothing you can't do on the road. I mean, that's day 101 stuff in football. You don't turn the ball over on the road, and you don't commit an excessive amount of stupid penalties on the road, or you're going to lose. That's just the way it is. That's just the way the game goes. But moving on, I do believe that the Vikings were 9.5-point favorites in this game, and they clearly did better than that, as I thought they would. Played the Raiders at home, beat them 34-14. I mean, this was just... I mean, what can you say? I mean, I like that. I like Minnesota. If they can do, 2 things: feed Dalvin Cook and keep Kirk Cousins as kind of a game manager. Don't expect him to do too much, and they should win the majority of their games with that philosophy. They have a strong defense. I believe a man by the name of Eric Wilson started in place of Anthony Barr, who has a groin injury. He had 2 sacks. I mean, Vikings had 4 total. Like I said, Dalvin Cook's the NFL's leading rusher, and I think he could very much stay atop of the NFL in rushing if he stays healthy. I mean, the man was so talented coming out of college, and I believe it was his first run as a pro. I think he broke one for like 75 yards. And he's got the ability, he's got the talent, he can do it. And I think as long as they feed him the ball, they're not going to have a very sexy offense. They're going to be one of those teams that just rely old school on the run and a strong defense. But that can win you games in this league. Don't expect Cousins to do too much. That's when things start to usually go sour. But oddly enough, I did not know this, but Kirk Cousins, for the first time in his career as a Minnesota Viking, wasn't sacked this game. I did not know he has not been sacked. Or he has, in each of his games, he's been sacked at least once, but he wasn't sacked yesterday. Derek Carr just kind of ho-hummed with it. He went 27 for 34, 272 with a couple touchdowns and a pick. But, Yeah, Vikings impressive. One really big. Team that we expected to win big and did was the Patriots. They were at home to the Jets. And they still don't have any touchdowns against their defense. I mean, it was the 2 touchdowns that the Jets scored was off of a pick 6 and a fumble recovery. The Patriots actually led 20-0 at halftime. And there's nothing much you can say. Does New England have the best defense in the league? They look like they could. They really do. I don't think they do. I just haven't seen them play anybody exceptionally well. With outside of Pittsburgh in Week 1, but they even with Roethlisberger in, they've just looked flat all season so far on offense. So I don't know if I want to, I don't want to put it all on New England, but these are NFL teams and they're shutting him down. And to go, 3 weeks into a season and not allow a single touchdown, that's impressive. Brady went 28 for 42 with 306 and 2 touchdowns. Luke Falk, he didn't have a chance. 12 for 22, 98 yards and a pick. Le'Veon Bell, who came out on Twitter. I think Twitter has got to be one of the worst things out there for these athletes. It's just, it gets them in such a big hole or puts such a target on them. He comes out and I believe he said that, I'll remember this moment for all you haters and stuff like that. No, you're not allowed jumping on the bandwagon when we rewrite this ship and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, your team is 0-3. What do you expect people to do? You expect people to ride you, and say, man, they're just really good. I just don't know what's happening. They just can't seem to get it done. I don't know what's going on. No, you guys aren't a good football team. Injuries aside, even when you're healthy, you guys still aren't a great football team. And you're not a great, you haven't really contributed much. I mean, he showed in the Browns game last Monday night that I don't know. I didn't get to really watch a whole lot of this game, so I'm not going to say that he didn't do this, but he ran really hard against the Browns. I don't know if he did that against New England or not, but I know he didn't perform very well. So that's all I've got to go off of. 18 carries for 35 yards. I mean, you wonder why they're hating on you. I mean, I got a good speculation on why that might be. But moving on. We got the undefeated 2-0-1 Lions taking on the Eagles. Lions were able to pull it off there, and Jamal Agnew. I hope I'm saying his last name right. But he returned the first kickoff this season for the NFL for a touchdown, 100 yards. Matthew Stafford went 18 of 32 for 201 yards. Or, Marvin Jones had 6 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. So 101 of his 201 yards went to Marvin Jones. So he had 100 yards to anybody else other than Marvin Jones Jr. So take it for what you want. They did what they were supposed to do. They got the job done. Eagles had an opportunity at the end. Malcolm Jenkins blocked a field goal that the Lions were attempting to put them up by 6. And on a 4th and 5 play, Darren Sproles caught a first down pass. It was called back for pass interference. And then I believe Wentz chucked the ball into the back of the end zone that wasn't caught, and then they just kneeled on it, and that was the end of the game. The Eagles have lost 2 in a row. I'm not sold on them. I'm not sold on Carson Wentz. I've said this before. They did make it interesting there in the end. mean, Wentz didn't perform terribly bad. He went 19 for 36, 259, 2 TDs, but he didn't perform extremely well either, I just don't think this team is as good as everybody thinks it is, or thinks they are, I should say. The Cowboys are definitely the best team in that division, but I don't see anybody even kind of competing for that wild card spot, to be honest. I just don't see it. I think there's too many other talented teams in the NFC, and I think the Eagles are going to be sitting on the couch. They're going to be, flying high on the program guide come playoff season, I think. So that's just me. Still early in the season, but I'm not a huge fan of them. That brings us to the Panthers at the Cardinals. Panthers winning big. I mean, big. They were actually down at one point in this game, early in the third quarter, 17-14. But they just rallied behind Kyle Allen. He played a heck of a game. It was just a really nice game. Went 19 for 26, 261, 4 touchdowns. McCaffrey went off. He had 24 carries for 153 and a touchdown. And yeah, I was really impressed with what they were able to do. In absence of being without Cam, I thought this team really came out and played really hard and showed a lot from Kyle Allen to kind of outduel his old college teammate at A&M and Kyler Murray, who actually got dropped back to reality a little bit here, I think. He actually led the team in rushing, which isn't a good thing. But he managed to go, I believe his first 2 games as a pro, he threw for over 300 yards. He didn't do that this week. He went 30 of 43 for 173, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Ran the ball eight times for 69 yards. They just got... Carolina more or less throttled him in the second half, and they just had no answer for him. It was an impressive win for them. David Johnson had 11 carries for 37 yards. There's moments of Arizona where they look like they can do something, and they don't need him. But at the end of the day, I think, and I know he could be banged up as well a little bit. We don't know how he is feeling and where he's at, but I just don't think, as far as that offense goes, and given the fact that you're starting a rookie quarterback, that they don't try to use him more in the offense, whether it be in the passing game or the running game, especially the running game. Seems like he's getting less than 13 to 14 carries a game, and I just don't like that. I don't like that at all from them. I think they need to use him a lot more if they want to win some ball games, because they haven't so far. And we'll just see. But it is a long season, but I think in order for them to succeed, that's what they need to do. Now, one of the biggest surprises of this Sunday, I think, for many, many people, it just completely, shocked a lot of us watching the league. Daniel Jones' first start, he didn't do much, but lead his team from 18 down to come back and win the game. So now is that accredited to how good he performed, or was it just Tampa Bay not bringing it that game? No, not at all. I think Daniel Jones played really well. I think he kind of struggled in the beginning. I mentioned in the previous episode how we didn't really have a whole lot to go off of him, except the fact that he did turn the ball over quite a bit in preseason. Well, he had a fumble, and he actually had 2 fumbles. He sacked 4 times. So, but it doesn't matter. He was able to rally his troops and win the game in the end. He ended up finishing 23 for 36 with 336 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran for a touchdown, and I think that's the biggest difference between him and Eli Manning, because they want to say that he's like an Eli Manning 2.0 with kind of his, I don't know, his kind of clueless look that he has on his face half the time, and just kind of the way he carries himself in interviews too. It just, if you close your eyes, you would think it was a young Eli Manning that's talking, because they kind of have the same demeanor and they kind of have the same tone when they speak. But you know, he has that mobility that Eli doesn't have, and he used it to his advantage on a couple key plays. It's kind of unfortunate for Tampa Bay, though, at the same time, you know, being up by that much and blowing a lead like that. Just have to ask the Jets how that feels. But Tampa Bay's kicker, Matt Gay, went 4 for 5 this game, but he also missed an extra point. Guess what? They lost by 1 point. But the biggest thing was he missed a 34-yard field goal at the end of the game as regulation went out. That would have won it for him, and missed it wide right. And when you lose by 1 point, you know, that's a tough pill to swallow. That's really hard to deal with, and you just got to tip your cap to Daniel Jones, because you know he played really well and was able to pull it off for him. Moving on to a very interesting game, I would say, to say the least, was the Texans at the Chargers. Texans ended up pulling it off there, 27-20. Chargers led 17-7 at halftime. But there's something with these Chargers. They have talent up the wazoo. They're a very, very good team on paper, but they just keep, you know, they take one step forward, they take 8 steps back. They keep just shooting themselves in the foot with dumb penalties, turnovers. It's just unreal. And you know, you look at the team that they were. They actually, I believe, started this last season 1-2, and then went on their 11-2 run. They won 6 straight. Are they expecting that same kind of spark to happen again? I don't know, but it's just too much. It's this that's what this team is MO been all season, and it's kind of unfortunate, because I kind of liked it. I kind of liked that dynamic that they brought last season, kind of rivaling Kansas City, and you know, showing people that Kansas City can be beat by more than just New England. But man, I just don't get it. But you gotta also tip your hat off to Houston. They were able to come back, scoring 20 straight points. J.J. Watt actually had a sack this game. He's been without one all season. He actually got 2, and the defense as a whole got 5. So, I mean, Watson went 25 for 34, 351, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's all you can ask your quarterback to do, and everybody on that team seems to rally behind him and really like what he brings to the table. And they have just tremendous faith in him, and it shows. Why? I mean, he's up there. He could become an elite quarterback within the next few years. I think he's just right. He's right there in that conversation. I don't think we're going to crown him that until some of the current elites are retiring. But he's right there in the Patrick Mahomes conversation. Is he Patrick Mahomes? No. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is he's on a whole nother level right now with what he's doing. It's just incredible. So I'm not going to – it'd be an injustice to Mahomes and kind of unfair to Watson as well to even put him in that same category, because not only is Mahomes right now playing at a elite for his age, given he's only played in 20 games. I mean, he's up there with the big dogs of the league and outperforming them. So, yeah. Anyway, not to lose track of the game that it's at hand, but Phillip Rivers, he's 31 for 46, 318, 2 touchdowns, but 13 catches, 183 yards, and 2 touchdowns went to Keenan Allen. So I made up a big chunk of his yardage and touchdowns for sure. Those were his touchdowns. But I'd like to point out too that these are the things I said that LA is a talented team, but in this game alone they had they fumbled deep in Houston territory. They had an interception and a touchdown that was called back from a penalty. And they've had 3 touchdowns called back this year in their 2 losses. So, and I believe this is another game where they lost by was it 1 touchdown? It was at least 1 possession game that they had a chance to win it and they didn't do it. So maybe they can shake off this rust, but I don't know. I don't want them to think that they can pull off the same crap that they pulled off last year, going 11-2 and going on that roll, because that's not likely to happen all the time. So just gotta play better ball if they want to be up there with Kansas City. But Kansas City's just running away with this division right now, with how the other 3 teams are playing. But now moving on. Go to the Saints at the Seahawks. It's another surprising game. The outcome. Saints winning this one 33-27. Saints just rolled on Seattle and was surprising given them being at home. I was really really surprised with how that happened, and they Teddy Bridgewater needed this kind of win. He didn't have to go out and do anything too spectacular. He had kind of a modest day as far as what you could ask for him to do, but he was helped out a lot by his defense and his special teams. The Saints had a punt return for a touchdown and a fumble recovery for a touchdown, but I'll be the first one to say I'll eat the crow right now, and I'll say that I didn't like their chances at all with these 6 games being without Breeze. But, man, if they can play cohesively as a unit this well, moving forward, they might have a pretty good shot. They might go, maybe 500 in this stretch. But, this first game of these 6, I was impressed. I was impressed with what they were able to do. Russell Wilson, 32 for 50, 406 yards, 2 touchdowns. So, he threw the ball well, and no turnovers for him. So, it's just, like I said, they had everything rolling, and you got to tip your hat off to them. They played really, really well. And another thing that really helps Teddy moving forward is Kamara has just played, great. He's played outstanding. He made up for 16 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. He also caught 9 passes for 92 yards and a touchdown. So you got that defense that's going to help you out, and get some turnovers for you, and special teams can play well, get you in some good positions. That's all you can ask for in the NFL, and it just makes it all the more easier to win. And now let's move on to this week's game of the week. That's up for debate, if you want to call it that. I thought it was, but if you don't know what game I'm talking about, you've been living under a rock, and I'm sorry, but you need to get down with your inner football self and get up and watch some. But in the AFC North, our first game of the AFC North that we're going to be previewing. But, all right, it's the Ravens at the Chiefs. Man, this had all the makings to be a great one. And, it definitely got interesting. Baltimore made it interesting there towards the end. But, there you go. you kind of wanted to evaluate Baltimore, see where they were at. They're a great team. Don't get me wrong. They're probably the best team in the AFC North. But man, when it comes to matching up with Kansas City, they're not there yet. No, I don't think so. Kansas City led 23-6 at halftime. And it's kind of odd, the mentality that Baltimore had going into this game. I mean, it makes sense, but then again, it really doesn't. It doesn't show a lot of faith in your defense. You're kind of just basically, I know what the word I'm looking for is, but you just basically are just kind of surrendering yourself to the offense and saying like, okay, we know you guys are going to score some points, and the only way we can beat you is by scoring more points than you. So that was actually what John Harbaugh's philosophy was, because those that didn't know and didn't catch the game, Baltimore was 0 for 3 on 2-point conversions. They insisted on going for 2 whenever they scored a touchdown, and that was the reason. They said, we know in a game like this, we got to try to score as many points as we can, so that's what we did. Well, when you lose the game by 5 and 3 points are taken off the board, that could have been easy chip shots for Justin Tucker. Now you're looking at a 2-point game with Justin Tucker as your kicker, who can hit it from about 3 miles away. I mean, you're kind of, I don't know. I just didn't like that philosophy on his behalf to just kind of, say, well, your offense is good, but our offense is better, and our defense isn't going to stop you. So, which their defense has played really, really well, with the exception of this game. I mean, so it just kind of baffles me a little bit. I mean, you gotta. I'm not gonna say that Kansas City is the best team in the NFL, or more or less the best team in the AFC. But man, I gotta see them play New England. I mean, that's just all there is to it, because I looked at Baltimore, and I think a lot of people agree, and we'll see it next week, I'm sure. But I got a really, really good defense out there, and Kansas City just lit them up like Swiss cheese. I mean, it was just. I mean, in the second quarter alone, Kansas City scored 3 touchdowns and a field goal, 24 points in one quarter. Do you realize how hard that is to do? I mean, you know that they get the ball another 4 times, so it's not like it's just incredible. Mahomes. He did just as advertised. He played great. He had a couple. They actually, before I get into his numbers, I also want to point out too, before I forget, that they have the most 20-yard plus plays, obviously this season, and I believe it was an NFL record that they broke for that, and the most in like 20 games or something of that nature. But that's the thing. They take shots downfield more than any team in the league, and it pays off for them. It's just they can just beat you in so many different ways. But going back to Mahomes, he was 27 for 37, 374 and 3 touchdowns. It's hard to beat. It's hard to beat somebody putting up those kind of numbers. I mean, he's just incredible. As far as what the Ravens were doing offensively, I mean, Lamar Jackson didn't do bad, but they definitely had a recipe to stopping him or controlling him, containing him for the most part. He went 22 for 43 with 267. He did run the ball 8 times for 46 yards, and that was actually part of their MO this game. They wanted to establish the run, and they got it with Mark Ingram. He had 16 carries for 103 yards and 3 touchdowns. So anybody that had him on your fantasy team, you were a pretty happy person waking up today. Hats off to what he was able to do. But like I said, Kansas City just gets you in that hole. When they score 24 points in 15 minutes. I mean, it's just they're just incredibly well coached. Got a great offense. and they're a tough team to play. And like I said, I don't want to say they're the best, but man, I got to see what they can do against New England, because I'm not taking anything away from New England until they give me a reason not to. And they've been just as good as they were the Super Bowl run that they had, if not better. I think they give Kansas City a game for sure. I think. It looks like all signs are pointing to that, barring any crazy injuries or anything. But it looks like those two teams are the top dogs in the AFC, if you had to ask me. But I don't think I go alone with that either. But moving on from that game, we're going to talk about the Bengals at the Bills. Where can you start with this game? This was a very, very interesting game. There was a lot of bad, questionable calls that happened in this game, but I'm not that guy. I'm not going to come in and say that, that explains why they lost or this, that, and the other. Did it have any effect on the game? Yeah, I think it did. I think a couple plays did for sure. But at the end of the day, I'm also going to be the first to tell you that they didn't play well enough anyway. They got buried in a hole, 14-0 at halftime. Their opening touchdown drive, they drive down the field, score, and then line up to kick an extra point, and the Bengals got 12 men on the field. Puts them up at the 1. They went for 2. They got it off basically the same play that they ran that got them the touchdown. And then 4 turnovers by the Bengals, a couple fumbles, a couple picks, although one of the picks wasn't till the end of the game. So, you can take it for what you want. But, they gave Buffalo a chance to really, really pull ahead in this game. And I think if it wasn't for our defense playing as well as they did, because you got to tip your hats off to the way they played. They played outstanding ball out there for the most part. You got to consider how long they were on the field. They were just, it seemed like, I believe it was like the first 9 possessions for Cincinnati. They amassed 3 first downs and 90 yards of offense. Well, how long do you think the defense is going to be on the field when you're just performing that bad? The penalties killed him. Just the stupid penalties. See, it's not like they were over-committing penalties, like they committed this penalty and that penalty and the other. Like, they weren't Atlanta by any means this week, but they just always find a way to have a turnover in that crucial moment when you don't need it, or when you're trying to gain some momentum. And I believe they had a false start on a first and 10, and it's like, yeah, and they needed it. They needed that, because I believe that was the first drive where Buffalo had taken a 14-0 lead, and it's like, okay, now what are you guys going to do? First play, Andre Smith jumps, false start. And, it's just, it's not going to cut it in this league. And like I said, the Bengals had their opportunities, and they just didn't capitalize on them. They actually had a kickoff return. This is one of these penalties that I wasn't too big of a fan of. They had a kickoff return that was called, a touchdown on the field, but then immediately was reversed because of a hold by Auden Tate on the right side. Phillips was cutting to the left, going upfield, and this hold happened on the right-hand side. And it's kind of one of those ticky-tacky holds where, he should have let go. That's what he was supposed to do. He needed to let go. The guy was starting to turn around, but could he have made a play on the ball? I don't think so. Absolutely not. At that point, Phillips was jetting down the sideline, and I don't think there's anybody that's going to catch him at that point. But they called it. Of course, they called it back. Cincinnati didn't score on that drive, and that was one of their many issues that they had. But they were able to be pretty resilient in the second half. Like midway, kind of late into the third quarter, they ended up scored 17 points on 3 consecutive drives, and it was big. Randy Bullock hit a 43-yard field goal with 4:54 left in the game that put him up, and all the Bengals fans know how reliable Randy Bullock has been here lately, and really hasn't been for the most part. But and then what does Buffalo do that very next drive? They just drive down the field. 2 plays later, have a rookie tight end, Dawson Knox, who just bowls his way through 3 guys. Unfortunately, I will say that the first man that he met contact with was Sean Williams, and he did appear to grab him by the face mask, kind of throw him down. And that's one of these things that very seldom is face mask ever called on the offense, but it's very much a part of football, and quite frankly, it needs to be called. I know they don't want to call penalties like that in a crucial situation, but if it's there, it's there. And it was a great, the guy deserves all the credit in the world for what he was able to do, breaking those 3 tackles, and it definitely put a spark into that Buffalo team, because they had gotten flat there in the second half. Like I said, they were up 14-0 at halftime, so they only managed a touchdown in the second half. But that touchdown came off that drive, and it gave the Bengals not very much time to have to come back and drive down the length of the field and hope to get a touchdown, because they were down by 4, so that's kind of the unfortunate thing. But the Bengals drive down the length of the field and get a tip ball that goes up, up in the air, and whatever happens. We all know, and we've seen that story many, many times, what happens when that takes place. And Tre'Davious White, who actually had both of Dalton's picks that he threw, he caught both of them. He ended up catching this one, which provoked Zach Taylor to sprint on the field and just scream his head off. And because he was unaware that White had, I guess, basically gave himself up on the play. I don't know. You can take it for what you want, because those that didn't see it, he catches the ball. There's nobody around him. Nobody touches him. He just gets up and sprints backwards towards their end zone, which technically would be a safety. And I could sit here and just bicker on and on about that and how it would have been a safety, but what it also would have done? It would have given the Bengals it'd have been down 21-20 with 20 seconds left, with no timeouts, and had to drive the length of the field for a field goal by a field goal kicker that hasn't really been the most consistent guy. Yeah, he made a decent one in the game, the 43-yarder, but are you really going to tell me that they were going to win that game if they called that a safety? I don't think so. But one thing I do like is the amount of intensity that Zach Taylor brings to that team. You can tell that these guys really like to, go to battle with him, and they see how intense he gets, because that's something that you didn't see from a Marvin Lewis coached team last season. We all know he had that kind of same look, same arms crossed, kind of looking down kind of thing, same kind of glare. Not really an emotional guy, and the Bengals are 0-3 right now, but they definitely they appear to be, having some fight left in them. They're not rolling over and dying like, with some wasted effort like I saw many, many games in the last couple of years under Lewis. So, and not to take anything too much from Buffalo. I mean, they played a great game. They're 3-0. I think they're a little overrated with that 3-0, and I believe they play New England this week, and we're going to see how solid that 3-0 record really is. But, they did what they needed to do. Josh Allen had a couple plays where he did not play like he played like a 10-year veteran with some of these plays that he made, rolling outside and just fighting for extra yards and putting himself out there. He had some ill-advised throws, but he's still young. He's going to make those. But for the most part, he really played well. He had one botched snap that fell to the ground, and he reached down, picked it up, rolled outside, and made a completion, for positive yards. And, that's asking a lot out of a, young quarterback to be able to do something like that. And, you got to tip your hat off to him. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. But as far as that team goes, I just don't see. I mean, they've got a talented defense. Don't get me wrong, but I think they're still a few pieces away from really making some noise, especially in the division that they're in. But like I said, it's a big win for them at home. You thought the Bengals really had a chance there, but at the end of the day, like I said, there were some bad calls, but there was also a lot of bad football that was played by that team as well, and they really need to clean it up because let's see them fight for 60 minutes like they did against Seattle, and until then, you don't know what you're going to get out of this team. I had high expectations for them, but when you get in that early hole, 0-3, and then you got to go and play a Pittsburgh team that's had your number for, the last, historically have had the Bengals number, but most notably the last 4 years, Cincinnati hasn't beaten them at all. You're going to look at maybe your first month of football with a rookie head coach being 0-4. It's a tough hill to climb, but we'll see how it goes. Everybody in the division lost this week, so that just makes it that much more easier. But when stuff like that happens, you got to be the team that rises above it and wins and gets you that much closer. But at the end of the day, tip your hat off to the Bills. They played really well when they needed to. Yeah, now we'll move on to a very crazy, sloppy mess out west between the Steelers and 49ers. Man, the Steelers just had so many opportunities in this game that they just blew over and over and over again. And the 49ers should not have won this game by any means. This Pittsburgh team, I hate to say it, because they've got plenty of talent across the board, but they might have the least, talented offense or least effective offense in this division. It's absurd. They had 2 early turnovers on Garoppolo's first 3 drives, and all they got out of them was field goals. They didn't even get a first down on either one of those drives that they had. And it's one thing to get a turnover early. Yeah, you can kind of rally behind that, whatever. But when you get 2 early turnovers like that, it almost just sucks all the life out of the opposing team, and they still couldn't capitalize on it. Mason Rudolph just looked like he didn't really have much composure out there. He felt a little nervous. The nerves were definitely getting to him quite a bit. Yeah, it was a very sloppy game, even both sides. There's a total of 7 turnovers in the game, 2 for Pittsburgh and 5 for the 49ers, and that just goes back to, how the Steelers did not win this game. I have no idea. this speaks for it right here. The Steelers were 0-1 in the red zone. The 49ers were 3-6 in the red zone. And the 3 opportunities they missed were because of turnovers. So, I've been pretty high on the 49ers for this season, and I still am, because you can have a bad game. I mean, it's perfectly normal. It's a tough game to play, and you can have bad games, and that's exactly what they had, was a bad game. But it shows something about the resiliency of your team if you're able to push back and fight and come back and actually win the game despite all that adversity, giving them 5 extra possessions. Can't do that consistently and win, but like I said, they just came out. Pittsburgh's offense just looked flat. They only ran the ball for 79 yards on 22 carries as opposed to the 49ers, 168 on 40 carries. They know what they want to do. Their identity is pretty clear. They're going to run the ball. They're going to play good defense, which, maybe you give some of the credit to the 49ers defense. And, I've seen it firsthand, and I know they have a great defense, but I've also seen, the Steelers, and how, underachieving they are on offense. And so I don't know where I got to give it to both of those on that behalf. But, the 49ers, look sloppy, but they got the job done. They're still a very good team. I still think they're the best team in that division. I don't think they have anything to worry about. They just need to clean it up and, know that they can't play a really, really good team, especially like a Rams or a Seattle, somebody in their division. They can't do that and expect to come out of Levi Stadium with a win. I mean, it's just all there is to it. But some high points for Pittsburgh. The Minkah Fitzpatrick deal seemed to work out pretty good for him. Early on, he was able to force a fumble that was recovered by Devin Bush, I believe, and he also got an interception. So I think he's going to be a good player for him, and I think it was definitely worth the first round pick. Unfortunately, though, for Pittsburgh, they did suffer an injury with Vance McDonald getting hurt in the game. Man, I don't know what to expect from these guys either, because they have the ability to have big plays, and maybe that was accredited to taking advantage of Witherspoon getting hurt for San Francisco. I don't know, but they were able to have 2 big chunk plays. Like I said, didn't get anything in the red zone, no touchdowns in the red zone, just settled for field goals and outside of the red zone, and those 2 big touchdowns. And they had every reason to win this game, but they just were so flat on offense. I just couldn't believe it. And I think they really need to clean it up. They need to discover an identity. I think Juju had a big touchdown, but he only had 3 catches total for the day. And the season's not over. If you ask Mike Tomlin, he would tell you that they're fine, they're all right, they're going to be okay where they're at. But you got to kind of worry about this team a little bit. They're just not. And I think even when Roethlisberger was in there, you could still see the stuff, but it's actually glorified now that Mason Rudolph is their starting quarterback. I don't think it's so much that even teams are trying to tee off on him and exploit any of his young weaknesses. I just see that offense is just being flat, not really doing anything too creative or too effective. They just seem kind of lost, don't have really much of an identity. So we'll see how they kind of progress throughout the season. But as far as right now, I'm not going to say they're the worst team in the division by any means, but they definitely look like they might have the worst offense in that division. But that leads me to the final game of the night or day, however you want to say it, between the Rams at the Browns. It's a Sunday night game. man, Cleveland, this has got to be pretty rough to have to sit and watch this because they had every chance in this game to win. They actually led 6-3 at halftime to a really good Rams team. Now, I will point out that not that it was really utilized or exposed, but the Browns were down 4 guys in their secondary yesterday, and the Rams really didn't capitalize on it. Jared Goff, I just don't know about him. I don't know if he's quite the answer for him at quarterback, but he better be because they paid him the $100 million to be. But, there's really not much you can say about this game besides, Cleveland has all the talent and all the weapons and a really, really good defense. But their offensive line is terrible. It's just absolutely terrible. Baker looked like a good majority of the game that, he was playing, 5 Mississippi with Aaron Donald and and Clay Matthews, and they just seemed like they were in the backfield, for most of the whole game. He couldn't get he couldn't get in any good rhythm whatsoever. I thought there was a lot of bad play calling in that game as well. I believe they called a 4th and 9 or a draw play on a 4th and 9 that was. Why would you do that? And they were looking like they were trying to kind of force them off sides, kind of one of those deals, and then at the end of the play clock, call a timeout, punt the ball, that kind of thing. But they called a play, and it didn't catch the Rams off guard whatsoever. Like I said, I think they only got like 2 yards out of it. So, they got to play better than this. Their expectations were set super high, and and that's why I was never really sold on them, because I needed to see what they could do. I needed to see how a first year head coach with Kitchens could do, and see Baker come in and see if he could mature in year 2. And he's been looking shaky, and I know Browns fans don't want to hear that, but they're also not going to they're going to have to admit it at some point. They've been watching the same Baker that I have. It's clear that he's not the same guy he was last season. And, maybe that's a lot of it, due to the offensive line not being very good, and he feels like he's got to run for his life every play. But, like tonight, last night, he went 18 for 36, 195 yards, had a touchdown, sacked 3 times, threw an interception late in the game, which that's okay. I mean, obviously you want to see them succeed in that situation. You want to see the touchdown, but if your only interception you throw is something towards the end of the game, and it's for a game-winning drive, I'll cut you a little bit of slack on that one. But I thought they had an opportunity to win this game, and like I said, they did. And so I don't feel completely stupid for making that pick, but Kitchens came out and even said that some of that play calling at the end, he puts all the fault on himself because he's the play caller for the team. I don't know why you don't at least try to run the ball at least once with Chubb. They had 4 plays inside the 4. Didn't hand the ball off to him at all. He ended up having a pretty good game. He had 96 yards on 23 carries. So it's not like he wasn't running the ball really well. I mean, you got to at least mix it up. Got to at least throw it in there one time, because he's a beast. He can get in there, he can truck some people. And the fact that you don't even try it once, and like I said, Baker throws the interception with 27 seconds left. It's just, you can't have that, but I don't know. We'll really get to see what they're made out of, because it doesn't get any easier from here on out. I've said that their schedule isn't the kindest to them. They got to go in and play Baltimore this week, and they know that's not an easy game. And Baltimore, after the way they performed on Sunday, they're going to be motivated. I mean, both teams will be motivated. It's AFC North football. I mean, how could you not get motivated for that? But it's going to be a tough task for Cleveland, and just be curious to see how it all plays out. And that wraps up all the games for Sunday. I will cover the Monday night game tonight between the Bears and Redskins. First off, the Bears are 5.5-point favorites in this game. They got a couple questionable players. Trey Burton looks like he's questionable to play. He may not play. Kyle Long, same thing. As far as Washington goes, Jordan Reed is out again, so that's not good for the Redskins. They really could use him. This game's interesting. It's basically the tale of two worsts, should you say? The Bears come in to the game with the third worst offense in the league, and the Redskins come in with the third worst defense. So you're probably not going to see a track meet, and you're probably not going to see you're not going to see a great performance as well on the defensive end. So I don't know. The Bears offense has only amassed one touchdown, and it was off of a running play in 2 games. Mitchell Trubisky is, he's towards the bottom of the league with 4.8 yards of completion. I mean, so he's got to take more shots downfield, and I think it's still some rust that's coming out because we mentioned in week 1 how he and Aaron Rodgers kind of looked in that opening night game, but and obviously Aaron Rodgers has knocked the rust off of him, but he's also been in the league a lot longer than what Trubisky is. So maybe we'll just say it's just because he's young, and so it's going to take him a little bit longer to get out of that funk. But I don't know. I really like the Bears early going into this season, but if they can't do something on offense, I mean that defense is going to win them, all their games this season. I definitely thought they had a strong defense last year, but I think their offense played a heck of a lot better than what it's playing so far right now. That just goes back. I mentioned how bad the Redskins defense is. They've allowed 569 yards between their first 2 games in the second half. And a lot of them, they say they don't want to blame the injuries that they've had in their secondary and off their defensive line and stuff, but they just feel like they're getting worn out in the second half, and that's when they're getting really beat up. But I don't know. It's just something they're obviously going to have to clean up. But a high note for them is Case Keenum isn't really their problem, and a lot of people were kind of worried, going into the season with how he was going to do. Colt McCoy being out, Haskins isn't, quite ready to play. So, but Keenum is, he started the season off with 601 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, and no picks. I mean, that's nothing, it's pretty good. I think you couldn't ask for much better out of your quarterback than that. It's just the defense has got to just, tighten up, and I don't know. The Bears have the 4th best defense, 6th against the run in the NFL. The Redskins can't run the ball. They've had issues with running the ball all season. So I don't know. I like Chicago in this game. I think they'll really get a pretty. I don't know how close it'll be. I look for maybe a 10-point at least victory for them. I know it's on the road and stuff, but the Bears are clearly a better team in my opinion, and I see them kind of running away with this early on. Well, that wraps up this week's episode. I will be on again tomorrow. I will cover this game, and then I will also preview the Thursday night game that we have coming up for the start of Week 4. the Packers and Eagles. So hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and I will be back on tomorrow. See ya.